Okay, let's take a look at buying your own computer. The first question I always ask people is, what are you going to use your computer for? Now, to some people, that is just confusing to them. They think, well, what everybody else uses their computer for. But there is actually a lot of different uses for computers, and most people do this general processing right here. And then others also do the general processing in games. And then others have apps they use all the time, or applications or programs that they use all the time that are much more heavy duty. And they don't ever think about those things. They just go, oh, well, I just use my computer for standard stuff. And they go out and get a computer, and then they realize, wow, I should have got something, spent the 200 extra dollars and got something a little better. So the first things first, really think about, what are you going to use your computer for? General processing, word processing, spreadsheets, browsing, that's what general processing or general use means. It's not very demanding. You can do that on a lot of different systems, systems as low as $500 or even $400. I always tell people, when it comes to price, spend $700 or above if you can afford to do that, because you're going to be much better satisfied. All right, gaming takes a lot more. So if you're going to do any kind of even moderate gaming, things beyond Facebook gaming is, I guess, what I should say, then you're going to need more processing power, more RAM potentially, but most likely a better graphics card. And the same with doing something that's particular. So you're going to school right now. What are you going to go into? Are there particular applications that you will have to use during your schooling that require more processing power? That is something to look at. So, moving on. First thing I like to talk about is, what is a Chromebook? Chromebooks run apps made for Chrome. Now, most people are familiar with the Chrome browser, and that's what is meant by Chrome. Chrome running on one of these is not quite Chrome running on your desktop. There are some differences and some incompatibilities. They also run Android apps, so anything that works on an Android phone will run on these. That makes them very limited in use, and I usually try to warn people not to get them. Very rarely do I actually find a student that buys a Chromebook themselves. They usually are given one. Hey, graduation gift, look how pretty that is. And it's, nice red or blue or shiny or whatever. And it costs a person like $250, and that's why they bought it. It is good for general browsing. It is. Look at Facebook and, watch a Netflix movie. Good for you. Chromebook is right there for you. But for anything else, it really causes problems, and there are some better options. And so I'm going to tell you what those better options are. First, everything that you can run on a Chromebook, you can run on Windows or on a Mac or on an iPad, because Google has made them run across everything. I have had students in my class that have a great deal of trouble in the software that we use. And it's all web-based software, right? So it should be compatible across anything. But if I have a student that emails me a lot and says, I'm having this problem, and there's just some crazy errors that I hardly ever see, I'll always ask them, are you running on a Chromebook? And they normally will say, yes, I am. And I'll say, well, don't do that, and it will work. In other words, it might be something really weird, like you're working in a spreadsheet, but for some reason it won't let you scroll down. It works for everybody else, but not you. That's a Chromebook. Some Chromebooks are not cheap. Some are in the thousands of dollars. And I would never recommend that anybody get one. Maybe 15 years from now, I might. But right now, you can run anything that you can do on that Chromebook, and you can do that with a cheap Windows computer. And there's a lot of cheap Windows computers that are just as cheap as a Chromebook, and you can run everything that Windows runs and the stuff that Chrome runs. And the same thing for an iPad. You can run everything Chromebook runs, and then everything that an iPad runs. And that's normally because, yeah, you can't run Android apps on an iPad, but there is always an app for iPad that's the same. And so those are the better options. Basically, what I'd say is, get anything other than a Chromebook. And I know that some people that might find that offensive. I don't know why people really get tied up with computers and their egos, but they tend to do that. I have Windows, I have Mac OS, I have iOS, I have Linux, several versions of Linux. because I get bored and I want to use whatever I want to use. And right now I'm using this Mac because this Mac really does well with these videos. But I've got a Surface Book 2 sitting right there, and I've got my iPad Pro. I would probably be using the iPad Pro right now to do this, but this little tiny window doesn't exist on the Zoom iPad app, so I use it on this Mac. But people really do. They really get caught up into, I hate Apple, or I hate Android, or whatever. Mine is totally based on what you can use it for and the struggles I see students have. And the struggle is that the Chromebook doesn't really do the job, and they end up buying something else. Hey, that's great, right? Somebody gave it to you for free. You're not out anything. You bought it for $300, and then a year later have to buy something else. Then you're out money, which is not nice. Now, we looked at the main components of the computer when we. So moving on, let's just do a little review. The main components that influence the usability of any device or computer is the operating system, and we'll look at those. And as we already looked at, central processing unit, right? That's the main brain. Random access memory, or memory, got to have at least 8 gigs. And then storage, where we're going to put all our stuff, and how much of that you need. You need at least 512, 256. You might be able to manage with, but most people get ticked off with that. So the operating systems either come down to using Windows OS, which is the predominant one. It's the one that people are very, very used to. And if you're one of those people that really has a hard time switching technologies and figuring things out, stick with what you know, right? No reason to make yourself frustrated in learning other things. Now, if you're like me, right, I've got 2 different Windows computers. I've got an iPad, and that's the one I use the most often. I also use Mac OS. That's what I'm using right here. And I have several versions of Linux. I use a lot of different stuff because I get bored, and I want that change. If you're the type of person that I can figure that out. I can figure that out. It's no big deal. Then you have a lot more options available to you. So just as a note, remember these things. We're going to go take a look at them in just a second. Multiple cores, the more the better. I don't know what happened to my more there. It disappeared. So let me type that in. The more, the better. Don't know why that disappeared. It's rated in gigahertz. And the generations are, 10,000, 11,000, 9,000 would be like 4 years ago, and so on. And then with RAM, right, it's rated in gigabytes. Usually we need to have 8 or 16, and more better to a point. So that basically once you hit 16 gigs of RAM, it doesn't mean anything more to you unless you're like me and you run a lot of virtual machines, and then you can run tons of virtual machines at the same time. Anyhow, let's go ahead and apply this information now that we've reviewed just a little bit. Okay, so we're going to start with the Apple ecosystem, or the things that they offer, because there's a little bit of information you need to know that makes them a little different. It's something that you probably should just be aware of that a lot of people are not aware of. And so we're going to look at that now. So, of course, the main thing we're here for is to look at these specifications, but let's take a look at this one. This is a MacBook Air, very popular model of notebook, and you can see there's basically a $900 one and a $1,200 one. Now, first thing you need to know is that as a student, you are in higher ed, and you can get a discount, which will chop about $100 and $150 off of that. So make sure you go to their educational store, which is listed all the way down here at the bottom. So make sure you do that if you're going to go this route. Now, the other thing you need to know is that Mac computers hold their value really well, and that's because they do last a long time. On this site, you're not really seeing any low-end computers. We're going to go check out HP in a minute, and you're going to see low-end all the way to high-end computers on their site. Well, there's no low-end computers here. Because Apple doesn't do any low-end computers, they hold their value more, which means that if I was to buy this computer, and by the time I got done, it'd probably be $1,300. That's a lot of money. In a year, I could probably sell it for 1,000. In 2 years, that would go down to about half the price. In 3 years, it would still be at a third. And so you get a lot of money back out of the machine unless you do what I have done, which is keep your Mac computer for such a long time. We use one. My wife has one as a home system. We've had it for 11 years. Yes, it's run perfectly great for 11 years, and that's a long time. But it's probably only worth a couple of $100 now. I've kept it so long. However, if I had bought it and then 3 years later sold it, I would have gotten a big chunk of cash that I could then take and put into another Mac computer. And that's not something that happens on the Windows side. Even if you buy an HP that costs this much, in a year it'll be worth a third and then only a fourth. And so they devalue very quickly. And if you don't believe me, go take a look, right? Check out eBay and you'll see that that's what happens. So that's the first thing. If you're a person that's like, I really would like to try one of those Macs, or yes, I want one of those, realize that this upfront cost that you're paying, yes, is a lot. But if you keep it nice, that's why lots of people will protect them and not just run around and get them scratched up. Because if you keep it nice and you keep the boxes and everything, you can sell it later and get a big bunch of money back. As a matter of fact, I have got a brand new, I can't see it, look at that, it just kind of, there it is. This is my brand new iPad Pro, and I had an iPad Pro before. It was about 4 or 5 years old, and I was still able to get $350 out of that to put towards this one. If it was another tablet, it would have been worth like $60. That's all it would have been worth. All right, so now on to the specifications. Let's actually take a look at what we have here. And we're going to start with the unified memory. Remember, memory is usually what they list. I often call it RAM because RAM is a type of memory, and that is what this is. It's RAM. And so the unified doesn't matter. It's just 8 gigs of memory. That's good. That's fantastic. Our system will run. Now down right underneath here, we've got 512 gigabytes of SSD. That will be fantastic. This 256, it's going to be hard. People usually get really fed up with that 256. They have to delete things, and they can't have this video on or that set of music. It becomes problematic for them. And so this one's really just not going to do it, even though it's a $900 computer. Now, they don't use Intel anymore. This is a switch they're making this year. This that I have, this iPad Pro, has the same CPU as what you see right here. And it's telling us that it's got 8 cores in it that are the CPU. So 8 cores in that CPU, and then 8 cores in the GPU, which is a graphic processor unit. And then from there, if you look right down in here, 16 cores in its neural engine. And that's specifically for all the AI stuff that these applications are starting to develop into. And so that if it's an AI type thing, it's going to go to this 16 core neural engine. If it's graphics, it's going to go to this 8 core GPU. And then if it's just general processing, moving mouse and stuff around, that's going to go to your 8 core CPU. And you can look out there and see the reviews, how they compare to an i7. They compare very well to an i7, but I'll let you look that up if you want to. All right, I also wanted to show you Microsoft. So Microsoft makes their own stuff. Well, that's a lie. Microsoft doesn't make any of this stuff. They contract it out to somebody to make, and I think that's ASUS that they're contracting with. But the stuff is nice. As a matter of fact, I have a Surface Book 2 here, and it's just fantastic. The whole screen's detachable. It's a wonderful system. I like it a lot, but they're expensive as well. For instance, if we try to compare what we just looked at in the MacBook Air, this is the thing that's closest to it. And obviously that storage is a lot higher, right? It's a terabyte instead of 512, but at the same time, it's $2,000. This one is closer, but it's still got a little more RAM than the other one, and it's $1,600. So it's going to be the same price, is what I'm telling you. But they are quality machines. Somebody gives you one of those, It's fantastic. But none of these listed here are going to work for you because they're all 256s. And this one that's $800 is only 128. I mean, that's like running the OS and a couple other things. And that's a problem. Now, when you look at this, you see an 8 gig, you see a 128 or 8 gig and 256, 16 and 256. It's not telling us which one the memory is as opposed to the storage, but the memory would never be higher than the storage. There's just no use to having that much memory and that little storage. So this one is the RAM or the memory, and this is the storage. That's the way it works.